Our second little devotional thought for today comes from Matthew. And we're going to talk about enemies for a minute. I want you to look at verses 3 and 4. Matthew 2. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, the words of the Magi. We've come to worship him who was born King of the Jews. Was deeply disturbed as was everyone in Jerusalem. And he called a meeting of the priests and teachers of the religious law and asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? Now, there were two enemies that were created that day by that announcement. By the knowledge of who Jesus was, two enemies were created. One, an immediate enemy. That would be Herod. And second, a long-term enemy, and that would be Annas. Remember Annas at the crucifixion of Jesus? Do you remember Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the godfather of this high priestly dynasty that had lasted for over 63 years, no longer from the tribe of Levi, no longer from Aaron's family, but basically political appointees, former nobility from the Hasmonean ruling class. On that day, that man would have been alive, and scholars believe he would have been there as part of this group that were brought before King Herod. A few years later, just a couple of years later, he would have been appointed as the high priest by Rome. Here is a man who from the time of Jesus' birth hated him and fought against him. Sometimes when people begin to realize who you are and what God's destiny is on your life, hatred flows. Jesus never did anything to Herod. Jesus never did anything to Annas. But hatred flowed because of who God was going to make Jesus. Hatred will flow against your life when people begin to realize the destiny that God has chosen you for. And one of the things you also have to learn from this passage is that hatred passes through families. In verses 21 to 23 of Matthew 2, Joseph got up, returned to the land of Israel with Jesus and his mother. And when he learned that the new ruler of Judea was Herod's son, Archelaus, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned in a dream, he left for the region of Galilee. Now here's the second generation, the son of Herod. And God knew that the same hatred that filled Herod's heart now fills the son's heart. Hatred is often passed on from father to son. Sometimes sons feel that in order to be loyal to their father, they have to pick up their enemies and they have to pick up the same hatred. My goodness gracious, what a horrible thing to feel. But at some point, when God has his hand on your life and he has a destiny for you, you have to learn to recognize there will be enemies just because of what God has called me to do, just because of what God has called me to be. And sometimes those enemies, like Annas, will be long-term. Sometimes, like Herod, they'll be immediate. And sometimes, like Archelaus, they will be second generations. And 30 years later, the same family is fighting you. Just learn to keep your eyes on Jesus and follow him.